Demographics, who you're writing for. An ethnic audience? Do you want to be politically correct, or do you want to intentionally be politically corrupt? I mean, your choice. How are you trying to impact them? Ethnocentricity is what you're saying specific only to this ethnic group. Do you want to have a crossover piece that deals with a particular ethnic group, is made for them, but can be appreciated by a larger audience? How about putting in then a character who represents the larger audience, who does not know the buzzwords, does not know the anecdotes, and therefore when you need to use the anecdotes and the buzzwords, you can bring them in and they'll be instantly perceived and understood by your ethnic audience. But at the same time, the character who represents the non-ethnic audience will have to find out about them in the story, and at the same time that's happening, you're educating your larger audience to appreciate the joke, as it were. Putting in an extra character like that, an outsider, is a great way to help ensure that your film, which is targeted to a specific audience, or your novel, which is targeted to a specific audience, may have the potential for crossover. Don't put in that particular character or some other means of informing the larger audience, and they will be completely lost, and you'll never end up with a crossover into mainstream. Age groups, children's stories. Well, we've talked before, one of the best ways to do a children's story is to slice or dice the Dramatica structure. The Dramatica structure, again, is based on those 4 towers, and you can use only one of the towers if you want to make it a smaller story. Or you can slice it, dice it this way, slice that way, dice this way. And when you dice it, you can limit how deep the story goes, so that maybe you don't have character elements and you don't have thematic points, but you only have plot types of concerns in a plot. You can even represent those types as characters. There's nothing in the rules that says that the character elements have to be represented by characters. We need characters, we need theme, we need genre, we need plot. But which level needs to represent those things in the Dramatica structure is actually variable. The reason that it is assigned in the Dramatica software and spoken about as being attached to these levels, genre, plot, theme, character, is because in Western culture, primarily in American culture, specifically in Hollywood or popular writing culture, that's the way things line up. But you look at something like The Big Chill, for example, and you find that it seems more like the level of thematic issues is represented as characters rather than the elements. These structures are completely viable. It's just a choice of how you're going to represent in storytelling the underlying dynamics of your structure. So for children's stories, you still need to give them a complete argument at whatever level you operate. But you want to make sure that you don't go so deep that the shades of color are beyond what they've experienced. They'll know red, blue, and green, but they may not know mauve and teal and burnt sienna. Those are things that they would not appreciate. To them, brown is brown. So make sure you don't try to go too deep. All it'll do is confuse them, or if it doesn't confuse them, it'll seem like you're talking in monotone because they can't see the shadings, and it appears as if you're repeating yourself over and over again. So cut off some of the bottom details when writing for children, and how much you cut off depends on how old the group is, how sophisticated the group of children is that you're dealing with. For men's and women's stories, well, there are stories that culturally affect men more than women. For example, more men go to action stories set with an objective story in the physics class or in the universe class, and having the main character in the other area. Women would tend to look at stories that deal more with internal issues. Why? Well, culturally it supports that. Also, intellectually, women tend to look more inward because that's where our time sense is, and men tend to look more outward because that's where our space sense is. And men, being the creatures who go out and do most of the battle in the world, the ones who have to bring back the food in most cases, have developed, as a species, a keener looking outward sense towards space, and therefore they care about stories that deal with external issues. Women who have had to look forward, to plan, to nurture, to determine how things are going to evolve, to deal with relationships, have had to pay more attention to the inner world, and therefore, as a result of dealing with time issues, mind and psychology are usually more, more of a draw to the female audience. In addition, certain structural things like the mental sex of the main character, the limit, time lock, or option lock, all of these things can help position a story so that men or women would have a tendency more to empathize or sympathize with the main character. Either both could sympathize, both could empathize, or one would sympathize and the other would empathize.